Welcome to today's Tuck Shop. My name's David Savage. Thanks for tuning in. This is brought to you live from Disruptive Live Studio here in Waterloo in association with growthbusiness.co.uk. Thanks for coming along and joining us. Today we have Ozzie, Carolina, and of course my colleague Kat sitting down the other end of the table, meaning you get to choose what to eat first.
Great, first choice.
Well, that seat has, certain privileges, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to pick?
A Freddo, obviously.
Right, whilst Kat opens her Freddo, Carolina, do you want to pick something and also tell us who you are?
Well, first I'm going to pick.
Okay.
That is very interesting, pickled onion.
Pickled onion monster munch is a classic.
Yeah.
That was in school playgrounds all the time.
Exactly, so I have a chance to eat it again.
Yeah. You're the country manager for Wild Code School.
Yes, I opened the UK school a year ago, and then we're running in Shoreditch.
It's basically career shifters or students who are looking to get into a career in tech, right?
Yes, people who wants to change career or start learning more about tech.
Yep.
Come to us.
Absolutely. Ozzie?
Yep.
CEO and co-founder, no, founder rather, not
Founder,
co-founder. Yeah, I'm inventing someone who doesn't exist, depriving you of the spotlight.
Maybe you're seeing the future.
of London startups, or startups of London.
Startups of London.
Yes, which is a content platform for startups, of which there are many, and I'm sure that we'll get into it with one of the topics of conversation that we've got. Do you want to pick something as well? Back in Turkey, did you really have an equivalent of a tuck shop?
Not really, I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, I'll get the fudge and save this for 10 days.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
At which point my challenge to eat no processed sugar will end, and I'll
of
remember
course,
this moment and savor this
training
dessert.
for a half marathon. Although I imagine if this was kind of Turkey, you would have like nice, interesting baklava rather than heavily processed packaged sugar. So
We do have our own share of heavily processed, very unhealthy stuff.
Look, so today we've got 4 stories as ever to look into. First of all, we're going to be talking about Airbnb. Then we'll talk about TikTok, coronavirus. Again, it's still topical. And then FinTechs and startups. Basically, the amount of money that they're raising seems to be falling. So they're the topics that we're going to get into. We will start with Airbnb. I'm not sure who would like to jump in on this first, but to give you some context, this is an article from The Guardian, basically revealing that in areas of the UK, there are 1 Airbnb for every 4 homes now. And what started off, I guess, as an opportunity to rent out some spare space if you were away, maybe creating a holiday home for someone, now people are increasingly renting out second homes. It's become kind of a quasi-industry in itself, and where you've got kind of rural, heavy kind of holiday industry areas of the UK, Airbnb seems to be taking over the housing stock. Airbnb's fault? I mean, they've just built a successful platform, right? I mean, they can't really help if it's been wildly successful.
Of course, it's not their fault, but I think this goes back to a theme of, it's a certainly cyclical theme of deregulation, opening up, and then regulation to balance it out. That's how tech grows. If it is too tight with too many regulations, then there's not the space for tech companies to grow. But I think the key thing is, when it is again time for regulation, which it seems like it is now, the regulators must understand technology. I think that which is the biggest problem. The understanding of technology on the regulator side is quite lacking. I don't know if it's something generational, something due to the pace of this tremendous change. But I think that's the biggest issue here.
It would seem to be that Airbnb have kind of got their head in the sand on this. They're saying that the findings are based on unreliable scraped data and flawed methodology. Kind of a rejection of what the article is saying. Kind of, we're successful,
Ad hominem attack. It seems like
I think they grew enough that they changed the business model. It's not like rent a space in your house anymore that is free because you're not there or because you have a spare room. It's like rent your whole house or buy a house and rent it all to make money. So it became like you have a business on Airbnb, hotels, bed and breakfast. So I think regulations, they need to change some regulations a little bit. It's not like you renting something, you're making a business of it.
Yeah.
But to do that, they need to understand how the different parties involved in that platform actually function together. Do you think regulators have an understanding at that level, so they can actually regulate it in the way is productive for the businesses and people?
I'm sure we were talking about this like a few months ago.
Quite
on
possible.
here, and we were talking about how regulators, they just don't really understand tech and how they're trying to like form regulation, but they're like, ooh, but I don't really understand what's going on with this.
Yeah, there is a huge legal lag. I mean, it's interesting that in the article there's a comment that the company are both saint and sinner. You know, they've created this effective platform, giving people an opportunity to start a viable business, to earn some extra money in areas of the country where wages are low. Absolutely, it's another way of, I suppose, using the gig economy to create wealth where it didn't previously exist. Although the downside is that it's grossly unfair. You can open up your house to guests without needing a single check, certification or public liability insurance. And in places like St Ives and Cornwall, there are 18.5 Airbnb listings per 100 homes. So locals could end up getting priced out of the market. If people realise, oh, hang on a minute, on a London salary, I can buy some cheap place in Cornwall, which actually is pretty easy to do if you're...
And rent it out.
And rent it
make
out.
A business. So that's why I think
And
in
drive
one of
prices
the
up.
points of this, they say they have to have different regulation when you make Airbnb your business. It's
Yeah.
a second business. It's not you're renting a room in your house or your house when you're traveling. So they need to regulate it in a different way, but they don't understand tax or how to do that. How am I going to know that you're renting a room and you're renting your second home?
Yeah.
A bit difficult.
I also have general beef with Airbnb, if I'm honest, because I used to live in a flat in in Queen's Park where we had Airbnb above us, and I did once walk out of our flat to the shared communal fuse box at 3 o'clock in the morning and pull the plug on the electrics in the entire building because a group of Italians upstairs wouldn't stop partying on a Tuesday night.
You should have joined the party.
Probably quite mean-spirited of me, but I was like, I need to go to bed. This is not... I get that you're on holiday, but it's a Tuesday night, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, come on. We did also once have a couple stay upstairs. Our cat got out of our front door, ran up the stairs. Their front door had been left wide open, as had the door to the building. Our cat then caused me to destroy a game of Monopoly that they'd left out on the floor, which obviously you can't really put back, and just generally create carnage in the flat. Didn't really know what to do, so just grabbed the cat and went back downstairs and kind of left it for them to discover and wonder what the heck had happened. So Airbnb is just a bit random as far as I'm concerned.
The overall effective positive, let's agree on that.
I've had,
For-
I've
for-
had
for
good
you.
experience. Well, when I've stayed in it, because I use Airbnb to like when I go on holiday
Yeah.
a lot, unless I go with my parents. But like it's cheaper, isn't it?
It is.
Like for me, it's cheaper, and the ones I've stayed in have been really nice. But I guess there are like horror stories. I just haven't experienced it.
Out of interest, do you ever have that kind of appreciation that it's like Airbnb is often in residential areas and you kind of got to be slightly aware of that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've never like gone and had like a massive party. Like I've only actually been when I was like interrailing.
Yeah.
So there's only like me and one other person. So it'd be a bit weird if we had like a 2-man party.
And you know how it started actually? That there was this conference in I don't know somewhere in the United States, and there weren't enough hotel rooms in the hotel, so they started to open up their rooms. Actually, still it solves a problem. When there's a demand for an area, then there's the supply. So the overall effect, net positive, I would say.
More regulation, net positive, but more regulation. Okay, we're going to move on to the second story. TikTok stars. This is hilarious. TikTok stars could make up to $1 million per post, say researchers. So, go on.
I saw this morning. I was like, oh, maybe I should download TikTok then.
I thought the same thing when I read those. Like, whoa, okay, what are we going to do with this TikTok platform?
So what I find interesting about this is it points out that young people are seeking it as an opportunity to monetize their talents because they see it rewarding anyone's ability to entertain, whereas Instagram and YouTube tend to reward those who already have celebrity status, which I hadn't really ever thought about as a difference between the platforms.
I'm not sure if that's completely true because people can go on YouTube and post videos without being famous and suddenly they become famous.
Yeah, it was a great discoverability platform for musicians initially.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I picked this out because Love Island finished last night, and I think a lot of people have stopped watching it, but it did nonetheless finish last night because Actually, no, sorry, it finished at the weekend. Think about that. But one of the problems with it is that people have had some mental health problems off the fact that all of a sudden they come out of that program and they have huge social followings. So they kind of go from having maybe a couple of thousand followers to having hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. And they've not been able to cope with the added pressure. Now, TikTok, it would seem to be, is taking people who have no support structure and making absolute mega stars out of teenagers, effectively. The article talks about Lauren Gray, a 17-year-old singer from Pennsylvania, with researchers estimating she could charge as much as £152,000 per post. I just kind of wonder if people are thinking, yeah, there's this great platform, but again, it's social media. Just
you go to sleep like a normal person. You wake up next day with 1,000 followers and this money in your account, and you're like 17.
Well,
it's a bit extreme.
It's a bit extreme.
Yeah.
I don't think we do have like an education or anything to make people to cope with this change of I'm a normal person, and then because of social media, everyone knows me now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it talks about a 19-year-old Indian actress who will be the most popular on the platform with 194 million followers.
Phew.
Just absolutely bonkers. I mean,
It's crazy.
what are we doing to teach kids how to... Because there's going to be huge pressure if you're getting onto a platform like TikTok to... Is it almost like a social peer pressure thing that if your video or your dance doesn't get as well liked as someone else's, that, you know, however many they've turned off likes on Instagram, or they're beginning to trial turning off likes on Instagram because of the pressure it puts on someone when they post to see, you know, can they get X many likes, and I suppose whether their friends get more likes. No one's kind of thinking about that, and yet here's another platform that's taking it to an even bigger extreme.
I think it's very much like that. Back when I was a high school college student, being very popular in the classroom and having social influence were two entirely separate different things. But now today, for many people, being the popular guy or the girl in the classroom is exactly the same thing as being popular on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And the worst thing is now you have this perfectly quantifiable metric that is visible to everyone else.
Yeah.
Shows what reach you have. And this can especially be disruptive for a lot of young psyches. And I think it goes back to the idea of, do I see people around myself as my peers on a similar plane, or do I see myself as either superior or inferior to them? And most people think in terms of the second concepts. They are either superior to others or inferior to them. And when you have a bigger amount of following, you are superior. But that's not the case. So when you hit the reality face to face, then it can be very discouraging and potentially dangerous for the people, I think.
I mean, there's even a quote in the article that said, it's from Even Spiegel, saying social media in its original construct is really about status, representing who you are, showing people that you're cool, getting likes and comments, these sort of things. That's true, and worrying that someone, you know, who founded Snapchat states that it is about status, probably more than anything else.
It is always.
Yes, and status that you can fake it.
Yeah.
As well, because not necessarily what you're posting there and you're showing to the world is actually what it is.
We've talked about that plenty of times before. I mean, there would seem to be a slight shift in tone on Instagram towards being more authentic and not heavily glossing life. I don't know whether that is that me being naive thinking. You're pulling a face at me, Kat.
I don't know. I just think, like, I still think it's just so hard to kind of prevent it, because you can literally go on Photoshop and just, I've seen like things on Facebook and wherever where there's influencers who have photoshopped themselves into different places, and so like they pretended that they went to like Coachella and things like that, and people believe it and they think they live these crazy lives when they're probably just sat in their room just like
Depressed.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you don't think that there's been a slight upswing in people being a little bit more
I think
real about what their lives are actually like? Or is it that people
know.
who've already got the status then?
I think they pretend they're being natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it sells.
Yes, like I'm natural, but pretending that's natural, not really.
Marketing of meaning.
Only skin deep.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. We're going to talk about coronavirus next. So this is kind of coronavirus. We've talked about coronavirus over the last couple of weeks in this show, increasingly trying to find tech angles. And the longer that this mini crisis or crisis, I suppose it's not mini crisis now, but crisis goes on, the more tech angles start opening up. So coronavirus email hoax led to violent protests in Ukraine. Protesters blocked the arrival of evacuees from China. So this is interesting. An email that appeared to come from Ukraine's Ministry of Health containing false information about coronavirus cases in the country led to a number of violent protests and standoff with the police. The email originated from outside Ukraine and it falsely claimed that there were 5 cases of coronavirus in the country. In reality, there have been no reported cases of coronavirus in the Ukraine. It's almost, the suggestion is there that basically someone is attacking the Ukraine. It's a cyber attack of a kind.
Is that the one that was linked to, I saw something in the news about it linking to Russia releasing like false information and they've had to like deny those like accusations. I don't know if that's like linked to that.
Well, I suppose Russia would be an obvious suspect for trying to destabilise the Ukraine further.
Always.
Yes, and any other country for that matter.
Including Russia.
How worrying is misinformation and I suppose the ability to manipulate misinformation when you've got something like this that can engender so much panic in populations?
It's just a war of facts now, really. We have different facts, like that's something we've been discussing, haven't we? If we had the same facts about this issue or another, we would most likely agree on that and find a common, sensible solution if a solution needs to be found, or at least agree on that. But even amongst ourselves, we disagree because we all have different facts. So it's a war of facts rather than, I think there's a bigger issue there which is like that. And I don't really know how to proceed with that. And I find it unsettling personally because there are other matters as well, like climate change. And we can't even find the same ground to start discussing for solutions. Where does that take us?
I just think with technology it's really easy and quick to spread news. If they're fake or if they're not fake. It's really quick and fast.
It is.
One WhatsApp,
Yeah.
you can send to how many people in like 5 minutes? How many people can you
I think everyone's
reach?
aware of the cases of kind of mob lynchings in India, or, WhatsApp being the platform to spread it. Obviously, misinformation being spread in the Brazilian presidential elections. WhatsApp was very much at the centre of Bolsonaro's campaign, right?
Yes.
A lot of non-traditional spend and a lot of false information spread and videos that were fake.
And a lot of fake videos, I don't know how they do that, but it's just like it's misleading information, fake news and everything, and it's too fast that they disseminate this kind of information because of technology.
I suppose as well with something like coronavirus where there is so much unknown and there is already a suspicion of official figures. So you think about China and the fact that they keep changing the way that they report cases at the moment. And the suggestion again there is that they are suppressing numbers to try and stop the economy stalling. Then I kind of worry that then when the Ukraine, the official statement comes out counteracting what people have heard through other sources, how likely are they to believe what even comes through from an official source? If everyone distrusts that people might be skewing figures or cooking figures in a way that helps, helps the own political situation from the top even.
Yeah, I think they are manipulating some numbers depending what they want in a political part. Like China all the time it's a different number, Iran's all the time a different number.
But I suppose it's like, even in this country there's that distrust, or, think about the US as well, the distrust of Washington or a distrust of what comes from the House of Commons and this whole idea of the will of the people and whatever else. It's all being encouraged by technology and people hearing basically what they want to hear on tech, and now here's something that's taking advantage in a very malicious way of something that could be really quite scary. How do you police that?
we all agree it's amazing what these new technologies can do, and our lives are built on that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that technology is a force for good. It can be a force for evil, and it's up to us to actually be who is the police of that? Us, nobody else. So I think we each have an individual responsibility to fact check before sharing something. I think, with things that have had a certain time to mature, for example, you are visiting a friend, like there are the rules, the unspoken rules around how to behave, the gestures, the signals. So it is actually a good system that tells you how to behave. You have the etiquette of essentially behaving when you're a guest. There's an etiquette of internet as well. There's an etiquette of sharing. But because it's just such a new thing, we don't have those in place yet. But there should be, and we should push for that. And then the etiquette says you have to double. It's your responsibility. If you're sharing something which is not the fact, which is actually propaganda, then it is something that you should feel guilty about.
But how do you even recognize sometimes? People can share stuff that they think is fact.
That's the challenge. I have no answer to that one.
I mean, do you think that in a situation like this, it's right that maybe a country should go, you know what, we are going to shut down WhatsApp? In a particular difficult situation, you've got this free communication tool that everyone relies on. If it's spreading misinformation that leads to violent protests, racism, I mean, I've heard one or two anecdotally stories of people kind of stepping back from people sneezing on the tube, or people being a little bit more nervous of Chinese people, which is frankly ridiculous, because how do you know that just because someone is ethnically Chinese, they might be from Bromley, for God's sake, you know?
It actually happened to my friend. At work, people were like talking about it, and then they were like, but didn't really know how to like approach it, and she was like, she was like, I haven't even been to China.
So your friend's ethnically Chinese?
Yeah.
Right.
And people were like, I don't know how to talk about coronavirus now. And I felt awkward around her, and it's like, what?
But that's bizarre.
It's crazy.
But I suppose just solidifies that idea that people just act on stupid emotion over kind of objective kind of fact or looking into anything in any real detail.
Common sense is not so common nowadays.
Don't trust large groups of people. Right. FinTech startups raised $34 billion in 2019. Financial services startups raised less money in 2019 than they did in 2018 as VC firms look to back late-stage firms and focus on developing markets, a new report has revealed. Ozzie, I thought with Startups of London, this might be kind of up your street. Is this good or bad for somewhere like London, where you have an already reasonably well-developed startup scene? I suppose it could be good, because if they're going to be investing in firms in tried and tested markets, that's only going to stand to benefit the capital.
I mean, I agree with that to a certain extent. So I think there are two big takeaways initially that at least first, the fintech sector has been so grossly. There's such an unbalanced picture if you look at different industries that have got investments. Like fintech is so far above them, and of course it makes sense because London is the financial capital of the world, like head to head with New York in a way. So,
at the moment.
So it makes sense. It makes sense. But on the other hand, the second thing is. So let me conclude the first thing first. So the idea, fintech has been receiving this investment. That's very good for that sector. But how about these other sectors? How about these other industry verticals that are doing so many great things? So I think that's the first one. The second one is, I think there's a balancing out going on in some way. But the other thing is, especially my observation having these chats. So we've essentially done 15 episodes of Startups of London, told 15 stories. The last one, of course, was Wild Code School with Carolina. It was a fantastic episode. But all of these conversations I've had show that there is essentially a very big risk aversion here in UK investors compared to the ones in the United States. And some startups are essentially I think they deserve to get more funding, even if they don't have all the numbers there, and it's not that safe of an investment.
I mean, these figures would seem to suggest that funding is going to safe bets all over the world. I mean, there's the emergence of 24 new fintech unicorns in 2019. The insurtech sector and startups such as Lemonade, Hippo, Next, WeFox, Bright Health, they received a major boost. They raised 6.2 billion, up from 3.2 billion the year before. And startups building solutions that involved invoicing and tax services, payroll, payment solutions. So it's fairly conservative, traditional businesses across the board that VCs are kind of falling back on, which I suppose makes sense, but also feels a little bit dispiriting in some regard.
In a way, but also bear in mind, like traditionally for the last 10, 15 years, the world generally has been focusing on some verticals, and that has been shifting, like social media. It had a time, and then now it's fintech. Now, so as core problems are being solved, attention is shifting to other industries. So I think there were a lot of core problems with the finance industry. Like there was a very big tension, a very big gap between what technology could actually do and what was being done. And now that gap is actually smaller with great fintech companies. So I think the attention is beginning to move somewhere else. I think that's one of the reasons that I should keep in mind. I mean, what do you think?
Carolina,
Yeah.
no, go on.
No, because in the article they say they are focusing still in fintech, but they're moving regions in the world. So South America, what I think it's really interesting. I'm Brazilian, so I can see that what is happening is Europe, everything happens first here in the UK and the US. So all the investments, the startups, invoicing, online banking and everything here, it works here, it's being like good, and then they replicate in the other countries.
Yes.
So
Bigger market.
Southeast Asia, South America, because it's like we go second in there. So the investments are going there to just replicate the same. It was successful in here.
Yeah.
Out of interest,
Makes sense.
while Code School is predominantly French, it's a French business.
Yeah, the head office is there. Yeah.
I know that you don't work with startups per se, but you are working with people who are going into industry. You must get a sense of what they're interested in going into career-wise, and that might give an indication of where the market is. Is France markedly different from the UK, from what you can tell anecdotally?
Completely.
Yeah.
So people in the UK that want to work with tech, it's because they want, let's say, freedom. Because if you're a developer, you can be freelancer, you can work on a UK project and live in Thailand. It's very like, you can choose what you work with. In France, they are a bit more conservative in terms of working.
Right. That's not a surprise, really, thinking about it.
You mean they're more traditional in terms of the sectors and
They are not. They
industries
don't
they're
want
interested
to
in?
choose the job because they want to do what they want to do. Let's say. I think in the UK, you want to be a developer. You want to work with digital because you can do what you want from where you want to. You don't have to stay somewhere.
For freedom.
Yeah. In France, no. They want to change the career for something different. But yeah, that's it.
Stability.
Stability.
So this talks very much about Germany's doing very well, emerging markets, interestingly, doing well. What about, say, Manchester or Newcastle or the regional cities in some of these countries where, you know, London's a huge tech scene, Manchester's just emerging. Just a couple of weeks ago on the show we were talking about the gaming sector and how gaming's doing really well in some of the regional hubs in the UK. Is this a worry for some of those emerging bubbles, kind of the more regional areas of countries where there already are startup scenes, some of that funding that they would hope to be invested into some of those second, third cities maybe drying up?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but like there's the idea of causation before correlation. I love that approach. We don't always understand why it's happening, but we can observe and see trends. And one of those trends is that, okay, there was a Silicon Valley. Now there will be many Silicon Valleys. So we are moving into that era now. But still, there's this huge tendency to cluster. And they cluster because of people, actually. And people make the decisions. People make the decisions both for investment. They make a decision to join and work in the company. They make the decision to quit. They make the decision to partner up and build a business. So it's all about people, and they usually end up clustering. the bigger the cluster is, the bigger return on that cluster you have because of that marginal return principles. So innovation, the discs of innovation spin faster when you bundle people in a single location. So unfortunately, because of that, it seems like cities like Manchester will always be second to bigger cities like London.
Any final thoughts? I think we're basically running out of time. I think we've probably covered that one. Look, there's still lots to eat. So when we go off air, I mean, Ozzie, I know you can't eat heavily processed sugars, but hula hoops or what's it?
Monster Munch.
Monster Munch is the best.
Is it
Exactly.
good?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Try that when we go off air.
You said
Yeah, lovely kind of noises. Yeah.
But yeah, too late for that. So.
Look, thank you, all three of you, for coming and joining me today. If you've enjoyed the show, please do subscribe, comment below. If you've been commenting whilst you've been watching, thank you very much. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time, but until then, thank you and goodbye.